Hello everyone, and welcome to chapter 44 of this Flutter course. In previous chapters, we've been basically working quite a lot with block, and we've been making sure that our application's loading screen is working. So we have one place in the entire application that we're taking care of the loading screens, and we also have wrapped our whole authentication process inside a block. And we're very now close to being able to release our application to the App Store, Apple's App Store, and Google's Play Store. So this is usually what we do as software developers. Just before releasing our product, we basically go and clean it up, as we say. So we put some final touches to it. So even if you're a designer, you usually do that probably, like if you're working with Figma or you're working with Sketch, you first are like designing your product, and then before you present it to the product owner or the developers, you probably put some final touches to it. So that's what we're going to do in this chapter. And we have a few things also left to do, which have nothing really to do with the final touches to the UI. It's mainly to do with the product's functionality, and we'll talk about that first. So if you think about it, what we have at the moment is an application that the user can register, they can send an email verification, they can log in, and they can go into the list of notes that they have. They can create notes, delete notes, and edit and share notes. However, we haven't really exposed the functionality for a user to be able to reset their password. So imagine a process, imagine an application where you've created a user in the application and you forgot your password, and there's absolutely no way for you to get back into the product or the software because you just don't know your password. So you may then have to personally contact the application developer and say, could you reset my password? So it's a very, very difficult process to do manually, and you shouldn't really do that. So what we're going to do in this chapter is not only to do final UI touches, but also we're going to create a password reset functionality into our application. So let's get started with that. I'm going to do some screen reshuffling in here. As you can see in the caption, we're going to go delete all users in Firebase console and also all their data. So I'm going to bring up console, firebase.com, and I'm going to bring it to the main screen in here. Let's find our application. I believe it's this one. And I'm then going to go in here to a Firebase Firestore database. And let's start by going in here and deleting these documents. So let's say delete documents, and we have 4 documents, so it's nothing so difficult to do. Just one at a time, we delete these documents, okay? Here. And those are our documents gone. So you could just keep your collection. I think it's best because our application at the moment is assuming that there is a notes collection available, if you remember from our notes service. So that's that part. We deleted the data, but we haven't really deleted the user. So let's go off to authentication section of your Firebase. And in here, I'm just going to say delete account, and let's just delete this account as well. So now we're basically starting off fresh. So no users and no data in the entire backend. All right. So that's that part. Let's do that. I'm going to then bring up our source code in here. Let's see. So here we have our My Notes application, as we've called it. So that's Visual Studio Code. I'm going to resize it a little bit. And then I'm going to bring up strcpy as well, which has our app running at the moment. And the application thinks at the moment that we're logged in because it hasn't really communicated with the backend yet. So I'm going to just do a hot restart in here. And this is the problem that you'll sometimes actually notice in your application, in that Firebase isn't going to immediately understand that this user doesn't exist on the backend anymore. So if you delete a user from your Firebase backend, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's immediately going to be reflected to the application. So let's see what happens in here. If I then log out with this user like this, and then try to log in with a user that used to exist in the application, but I just deleted it, foobarba. And let's see what happens in here. And now you can see we say user not found. Okay, we're going to clean up that message as well soon in this chapter. So good, we have a clean slate now. So we have no users and no data in the application. So what we need to do now is to start by defining our events and states for forgotten password. Okay, so if a user says, hey, I forgot my password, we have to have an event so that we can send that event to our auth block. So you can see in here, we have to go to auth event dart file and add an auth event forgot password. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to open auth event dart file, and perhaps over logout in here, we're just going to say class. I'm going to increase the size in here as well to see better. Class auth, as we've set in the notes here, auth event forgot password extends auth event. Okay, just like that. And in here, we need to grab the user's email. So we say email like that. And I'm going to create a constructor for this as well, just like that. And let's just make this here with curly brackets. Okay. All right. So it's a name parameter now. And we just said auth event forgot password. Fantastic. So that's that part. Then we also need to go and define a state, because when a user presses a button, for instance, saying, I forgot my password, then our auth block is going to produce that state and say, hey, application, your state right now is forgot password. And then in the main Dart file, as you'll soon see, we will go and edit and add that state to our state handling, as you can see in your main Dart file. At the moment, we have all these states, but we're going to add a new state that says, else if state is auth state forgot password, then display a forgot password view, which we're also going to develop soon. So as the caption indicates, let's go and go to the file auth state Dart file. And I'm going to do that in my notes as well. After registering, it really doesn't matter where you place that code. I'm just going to place it here after registering and just say auth state forgot password and auth state. And then we have to also take care of this. So what should this state actually indicate to the application? Let's say that when you're in the forgot password view, which we're soon going to develop, there could be two things that you want to convey to the user in that screen. Either the user has just landed, so there are actually three states that screen can have. Either the user has just landed on that screen, meaning that there's no errors, nothing, we haven't done anything, so it's just a clean slate. So that's the default state of auth state forgot password, so nothing, okay? However, what if the user has actually pressed the send reminder email? Because you see, the way we're going to handle forgotten password is we're going to actually ask Firebase and say, Firebase, this user forgot their password with this email. Send a reminder email to them, or send some kind of like an email to them that they can actually reset their password. So upon user pressing that button to send a reminder email to their email address, a few things can happen. Actually, two things that we're going to handle. One is that, well, we tried to send an email, but it didn't succeed. So kind of an exception. So that's the second state. Remember, no state. Second state is there's an exception. And there's a third state that there was no exception, but we've actually sent the email. So three things we have to handle, okay? So the default state with no values is state number 1, nothing has happened. State number 2 would be actually having an optional exception here. And the third state is bool has sent email, like this, okay? So let me go ahead and create a constructor for these. I'm not going to explain this again because we've talked about this quite a lot. And I'm going to make these required parameters, okay? Just like that. And put a semicolon at the end. And in here, we're just going to call super. But remember, from super, auth state has a constructor here that has to provide is loading. Okay, so in this case, let's just actually take bool is loading as well as a parameter in here. And then we're going to pass is loading to our super as well, just like that. All right. So when we're actually working with this auth state ForgotPassword, we can actually give it is loading parameter, and that's going to get delegated back to auth state. So our main Dart file is going to be able to display a loading screen if is loading is true. If you remember from main Dart file, we had this beautiful block consumer with the listener that looks at any auth state, and as long as this auth states is loading parameter is true, or that auth states is loading variable or property is true, then it shows the loading screen. All right, perfect. So now we've taken care of auth state. So we didn't make any changes in main Dart file yet, okay? All right, what we need to do is now go to our auth provider Dart file and define an interface function for sending a reminder email. So I'm gonna go and do that right now, auth provider. I'm gonna do it here as well, auth provider. Okay. So let's go ahead and define a function that every auth provider, including our Firebase auth provider, has to conform to, okay? So let's say this is a future void, and we call it send password reset, like that. And we have a required string parameter to email, just like that. So this is now defined. After defining this, you'll understand now soon that we have a few errors because auth service conforms to auth provider, and so does Firebase auth provider. But we're going to fix these soon, okay? So as the caption indicates, let's go to Firebase auth provider in here and actually implement that. So I'm going to go to Firebase auth provider in my notes, and I'm also going to go here on the screen and say Firebase auth provider. And you'll see an error in here in Visual Studio Code. You can actually get help from Visual Studio Code to complete that missing override for us. You can see create one missing override. And this is basically saying that you're conforming to auth provider, but you're not actually overriding all the functions that auth provider wants you to override. Okay, so if you're working with Vim or if you're working with Sublime that doesn't, for instance, have Dart plugin, then you may have to override that function yourself. But the signature of that function is very easy. You can just go to auth provider and grab this function and just put a override before it. Okay, so that's completely fine as well. But since I'm working with, and this is asking me to save this file, but there's pretty much nothing that I did in this file really. Okay. So since I have Visual Studio Code, I can ask it to create the missing override for me, and it's going to probably create it right at the bottom in here. Okay, so that's fine. So let's put this whole thing into a catch block. So I'm just going to say catch like this. All right. And then if anything happens during this process of sending a password reset email to the user, we're just going to throw a generic auth exception in here. Okay. So like that. Then, and also, if you're wondering about this syntax, this is just like you ignoring an incoming variable. In Swift and in Rust and some other languages like Python, you could also do something like this, that you ignore an incoming variable using underscore. But in Dart, it's not really you ignoring the variable, it's you naming the variable underscore. But I try to sometimes use this just to indicate that, hey, I don't care about this variable, okay? But just know that internally, you're not ignoring it, you're just naming it underscore, okay? So let's go in here and now ask our provider. So so we just say await. Since we're in Firebase auth provider, we can actually say await Firebase auth. Oh, and we have to mark this function as async, otherwise we can't use await. And then instance, and then there's a function called send password reset email, and it says to which email, and we're going to say to this email, okay? All right, so that's our catch in there, but we also have to have another catch that catches Firebase auth exception, as we're doing in many other places. So let's have a look here, for instance, okay? So let's go before this catch and say on Firebase auth exception, catch E, something like that. And then curly brackets and curly brackets close. So I'm going to bring this code up so we see it better. So there are two things that we have to handle, two codes that we have to handle. As you can see, we're handling a few codes in here. For instance, user not found, wrong password. And these things are basically, I haven't really found the correct documentation for these things, like where Firebase has documented that these errors are going to happen with these codes. It's mainly that I found them out through experience, just like trying different things and seeing that things fail. And upon failing, I caught their error code. And now I know which error codes I actually have to handle. But if you search on Google, I'm pretty sure you're going to find some good documentation about it. Firebase and the Google team are great at documenting things. So one error that we have to handle is called Firebase auth invalid email, and the other one is called Firebase auth user not found. So let's first grab the error code. So I'm just going to say switch E code in here, because remember, any Firebase auth exception that comes from Firebase has a code of type string, as you can see here, and that's that string that we're interested in. So let's handle Firebase auth invalid email for now. Okay. And then in this case, we're just going to say throw invalid email auth exception. Oops. We already have this defined from before. Okay. In our auth exceptions here, Dart file, you see. And the other case that we have to handle is called Firebase auth user not found. So it's a user, it's like anyone asking for a reminder email for their password, and that user just doesn't exist in the database. So then we have to handle that case as well. It's called user not found, just like that, okay? And then we're going to throw a user not found auth exception. And in any other case of Firebase auth exception, we're just going to throw generic auth exception, just like that, okay? And we're going to save this file. Fantastic. So we fixed Firebase Auth Provider, but if you look at your Project Explorer, you still have a problem in Auth Service, because if you remember, Auth Service also implements Auth Provider, but it delegates all its responsibility to its Auth Provider. So let's go into our Auth Service and implement the send password reset functionality. So I'm just going to go in here and get Visual Studio Code to complete this with command dot on Mac or control dot on Linux and Windows, and just say create one missing override, okay? And in here, I'm making this an arrow function because I believe every other function we've done in here is an arrow function, since all these functions inside Auth Service, as I've stated before, basically delegate their functionality to the provider, which is given to it inside its constructor. So let's go ahead and create an arrow function, and in here just delegate this to the provider, and we just say provider send email verification, and in here we just say send password reset. It's actually called provider send password reset to email, just like that. All right, and let's just save this file then. So what we need to do now is to actually handle our AuthEventForgotPassword in the auth block. So I understand there's lots of like jargons that are flying around here, so you may just be a bit confused about, okay, what are we actually doing? So what we need to do now is, you see, soon what we're going to do is to create a little button in here and say forgot password. So when the user lands in the login screen, they may be like, okay, this is my email, but I actually forgot my password. So they have to have a forgot password button somewhere here. Upon them pressing that button in the login view, we're going to send this event to our auth block. So if you remember from our auth event, so I'm going to go back here. You don't have to go here. If you go to our auth events, you can see we have an auth event forgot password. So the goal is for our user for our user interface to send this event to the auth block, and then the auth block is going to calculate its state based on that, okay? So let's go now into our auth block file here, as you can see. And I'm going to do that here in my code as well. And we're going to go and implement this functionality here, forgot password, like this. And let's go and say on auth event forgot password, just like that. And you now should be quite used to this syntax, emit. And this is going to be asynchronous function and just curly brackets, just like that. So this is like the bare bones of handling an event in your block. Okay, now we're handling auth event forgot password. So what we're going to do in here is we're just going to say, by default, we're emitting a constant auth state forgot password, exception is null, has sent email is false, and is loading is false. So what we're basically saying in here is saying by the user pressing the forgot password button, what we're doing is saying, yeah, go to the forgot password screen. That's all. That's all we're saying, okay? Because then our main Dart file is going to handle this. It's going to say, okay, if the state is forgot password, I'm just going to go to the forgot password screen, okay? So then what we're going to do is we're going to extract the user's email from this event. If there is an email in there, it means that the user was in the forgot password screen and actually pressed the button to send a forgot password email to themselves. Okay, so if that's not the case, then we know that all the user did is just to go to that screen. So there is no email to handle. So let's just say final, if I can spell. Oops. Final email is event email. And we say if email is null, then we just return, meaning that, yeah, the user, it seems like the user just wanted to go to the forgot password screen, okay? So that's that. Now, if that is not the case, so let's just put a comment in here, user just wants to go to forgot password screen. And if we end up in here in line 21 for me, user wants to actually send a forgot password email, okay? And in this case, let's just emit the exact same state as we did before, but in this case, we're saying loading, okay? Remember, our main Dart file is going to catch all the states that have loading and actually display our loading screen or the loading overlay, okay? So that's that part. But then what we're going to do is let's just go in here and we have to actually say in here, do a try catch in here. So we say cat on exception, catch, E, like that. And since we're in our auth block, we have access to our provider. So let's say we wait for the provider to send a password reset to the email, just like that, okay? And then we have to enable two variables in here. We just say Boolean did send password or said did send email, and just like that. And we also have an optional exception like this. So the goal is we have a try and catch block in here. And in the try, we just say, yeah, this email was sent successfully. Because yeah, if you don't end up in the catch block, meaning that there was no error, then the email was actually sent successfully. And we will also say the exception is basically null. So we don't have to worry about any of those functionalities after this point. But remember, we are basically saving these two variables in here so that after the try and catch block, we can actually emit an auth state forgot password with those variables. So this thing is going to go in here. The documentation is going to go in here. And this thing is going to go in here. Okay, and is loading is going to be false. So that's why we're basically storing them in here. So in the positive case, in the happy path, as we call it, we're going to say did send email is true. And we're going to say exception is null. Okay. And in this case, did send email is going to be false. And exception is going to be E. All right. So we store those. And let's just then copy this state from above and let's just paste it in here. So in this case, we say, hey, the exception is the exception, if any. Invalid, oh yeah, it can't be constant if it's a variable. So let me bring it here again. So you can see exception is the exception, like that. It has sent email is going to be did send email. And is loading is false. So that's it. Now we are emitting that state to the application. All right, so after all of this, you see, and now that we've handled that event and the state in our auth block, we also have to display some sort of a dialog to the user. So if you're on the reset password screen and you've entered your email and you say, hey, send me a reset password email. After you've done that, we're then going to display a little dialog to you and say, hey, okay, we did that. We've sent an email to you. Go check your email. So we basically need a dialog. And if you remember, we have a generic dialog already. So we're just going to reuse that, okay? So let's go ahead, as the caption at the bottom of the screen indicates, go and create a file under lib utilities dialogs called password reset email sends dialog. So let's go ahead and do that under, I'm going to close this file as well. have a look at what we have in here. We have utilities, excuse me, dialogues. I'm going to create a new file in here and just going to call it password reset email send dialog.dart. Okay. So that's the file. And we're just going to say this is a future void show password reset send dialog. All right. So it's a function that just needs a build context. And we're going to get an error here simply because I believe Visual Studio Code imported build context for me automatically. So that was fantastic. Okay. So we're just going to return show generic dialog. Okay. And you can see this is also going to be auto imported. We've already had this function from before. So let me put a comma in here and a semicolon at the end just to get the Dart formatter to format my code. And I'm just going to in here say this is a generic void function. Okay. And for title, we're just going to say password reset like that with a capital R. And the content is also string. We can say we have now sent you a password reset link, something like this. Please check your email for more information, something like that. Okay. And you can change the string if you want to. And for the options, it's an arrow function that has to return a map, and it has only one button with the value of null, and that's it. Okay. All right, so that's our show password reset sends dialog. Now what we have to do, we also have to develop the actual view for password reset. So as the caption at the bottom of the screen indicates, we're going to go to lib views, and we're going to go here, you see, lib views. And under views, we're going to create a view called ForgotPassword View. So let me go ahead and do that. ForgotPassword View.dart. Okay. And I'm going to go into my notes as well. ForgotPassword View. Okay. So we're going to create a stateful widget in here. So that's actually quite a bit of code that we have to write, but we're going to take care of that. So it's not a problem. So let's go to ForgotPassword View. And the first thing I'm going to do is to create a stateful widget with STF in Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to call it ForgotPassword View, just like that. And since we need a text field on the screen so that the user can enter their email address, just like we're doing in the login view, let's go ahead and create a text editing controller. But before all of that, we also have to import materials so that we get rid of all these errors that are on the screen right now. So let's go in here and just create a text editing controller. So late final text editing controller, and let's just call it controller. And you remember this pattern from before, so I don't have to explain it again. So we go into init state. Inside init state, we create the controller. So we say it's a text editing controller. Oops. Text editing controller. And in dispose, we just dispose of it, basically. So controller.dispose. Okay, so that's just a boilerplate. There's nothing magical happening in here. We're just preparing that view, okay? So what we need to do also in here, we're going to create inside this build function, we're going to return a block listener, because based on the various states of auth state forgot password. So let's go to auth state forgot password here. Based on various states of this, we may have to show or hide different things. For instance, if we know that the has sent email Boolean flag is true, then we're going to basically clear the text field's value using the controller's clear function. And we're also going to display that dialog that we just wrote, has sent email, blah, blah, dialog. It was a long name. It was, let's see, in our dialogues. Where is it? In our dialogues, if I can find it, it should be under utilities, dialogues, and then we should call the password reset email sent dialog, okay? So we're going to display that. And that is why we need a listener. So inside this build in here, what we're going to do is just going to say we return a block listener, and this needs to be auto imported, as you can see. And this block listener actually listens for auth block, which also needs to be auto imported. So there's lots of imports. And if you don't have a good text editor like Visual Studio Code, unfortunately, you'll have to import all these by hand. And that's just a huge time waster, I'd say. So I don't usually give advice, but my advice here, at the least, because I think it's so important, is to get yourself a good text editor, because it makes development a lot easier if you have like Visual Studio Code. So we have auth block, and then the second generic parameter is auth state, which also needs to be auto imported. So there's, if you look at the top of the file, there's quite a few imports already that I didn't have to do manually. And so we have a listener. Let's get help from Visual Studio Code to complete the listener. And we also have a little, let's see, we have a child in our block listener that we can return. So in here, for now, let's just say we return a scaffold as a constant. All right, so we can now work on our listener first. So inside the listener, the only state that we're interested in, because this is going to return any auth state to us as they change, we're only interested in if state, if I can spell, is auth state forgot password. So that's the only state we're interested in. And then we say if state has sent email, then we're going to go to controller and say clear. And then we're going to await on displaying the dialog. So async, and then we're going to say await. And I forgot the name of our huge file in here again, utilities, dialogs, and password reset email. So I'm going to grab the name of this function at least, okay? So I grab the name of that function, paste it in here, and get Visual Studio Code to auto import it for me, okay? And in here, the only thing we have to do is just to pass the context in there. So if the email was sent, the password reset was sent, then we're going to say clear the text on the screen on the controller, and then show the dialog telling the user, hey, we sent an email to you. Okay. However, if there's exception like this, then what we're going to do is to display an error to the user. So we're just going to say await, show error dialog. And I think that also got auto imported again, you see? So then we're going to say error dialog with that context, and then we're going to say we could not process your request. Please make sure that you are a registered user, or something like that. And we can say, please make sure that you're a registered user, or if not, a user, or if not, register a user now by going back one step, okay? So this is just some text. I mean, you don't have to write this text. It's just basically saying that if you're in the forgot password screen and you're saying that, hey, I forgot my password, this is my email. If we can't find that email, if there's an exception, for instance, then we're going to display this message to say, hey, you may not be a registered user. Do you want to go back and register yourself? So, and remember, in here, you could try to be more fine-grained, because remember, our exceptions in here, auth state exception, in the case of auth state forgot password, if you go to our auth block, in this case, remember, the exceptions come from the send password reset. So this send password reset, if you go to our Firebase auth provider, send password reset, oh my God, where did I end up? No, Firebase auth provider. In this case, those exceptions could be invalid email or user not found. So you could actually try to be clean and in your in your forgot password view, and actually check what kind of exception that is. So I actually think it's better if you do that. I'm not going to do that for the sake of just saving some time, but you may decide to go ahead and do that. And I encourage you actually, excuse me, to do something like that if you want to. So what we need to do now is we've done the listener, so that's really good. But in the child, we actually have to create a proper scaffold. So let's go ahead and remove the constant in here, because at the end, we're not going to end up with a constant scaffold. It's very rare that you'd end up with a constant scaffold. And in the app bar, we're just going to say we have an app bar in here, and it has a title. And the title is just going to be constant text, and we're just going to say forgot password. Okay. Some commas in there to get the formatting correctly. And in the body, we're going to create a column. This is what I usually like to do, create a column, and then I'm going to wrap it in some padding like this. And let's just say padding of 16 as well. Okay. So then that's basically our main focus in here. So we need to work on a little column in your forgot password view. So now we have that. As the first child of the column, we're going to add a little const of text in here and to tell the user actually what they should do in the screen. So let's just say I'm going to grab the text that I had prepared from before and paste it in here so I don't have to actually write this thing again. So let's see. Why is it complaining? What is the actual error? Too many positional arguments. Okay, I've messed up something in here. Right, of course, because in the column I added actually didn't say children. So let me remove this. Children. Inside the children, first I'm going to put this text. Okay, so if you had the same problem like me, it's because you placed the text right inside the column, and that's not okay. We have to put it inside children property of the column. Okay. Then we're going to create a text field right after this where the user can actually enter their email address. So let's say text field. And in here, let's see. Yeah. We don't have a comma at the end of this either. So I'm going to put a comma in here. Okay, text field. So the screen looks a little bit scary right now. It's just because it thinks that it has to be a constant, but it's not a constant. So these little warnings are going to soon disappear. Okay. So let's say keyboard type. And it's a text input type. So I'm going to say text input type, email address. Okay. Autocorrect on email fields always has to be false. Okay. You don't want autocorrect on email fields. It's very annoying. And we autofocus as well so that when the user ends up on that screen, the text field is automatically focused on. And then we put a controller. And after this, the problem with the constants is going to go away. So that's fantastic. And then let's just go and create a little decoration with a hint. So we just say const input decoration. And we're going to say hint text is your email address like this. Okay. So that's that part. Now we've created the text field. After this, we actually need to have a text button. We actually need two of them. So I'm going to say text button like this. And inside the text button on the first one is going to be the actual CTA, call to action, meaning that when the users enter their email address, then they're going to press this button, and upon pressing this button, we're going to send the email to them. Okay, so let's say I'm pressed, and this is an empty function, just like this for now, and its child is just going to be const of text, and we're going to send me password reset link like this. So that's the first. I'm going to copy this text button actually and paste it again right after that. And in here, we're just going to say back to login page. And in here, we actually have this functionality from before in our auth block. So let's just go inside this and say context, read our auth block from the context. And then we're going to add an event in here and say auth event login. So actually, sorry, log out. So this is going to send the user to the login page. Okay, so that's the second button handled already. And in the first button, let's just grab the user's email. So let's just say email is controller text. And in here, we're then going to tell the auth block that it has to send a password reset to this email. So we're just going to say context.read auth block from the context. And we're going to add, and we're going to say auth event forgot password, and the email is email, just like that. All right. So that's it. Actually, this case maybe it's cleaner not to have a comma in there, because if I put a comma, then it formats the code like this, but without coming formats it like this, which to me, in my opinion, is a little bit cleaner. Okay. So I think now we've implemented that. So this screen should be ready, our forgot password view. So as the caption now at the bottom of the screen indicates, we need to go and look for the auth state forgot password and return forgot password view in main Dart file. So I'm going to go to main Dart file. So let me close this, and let's go to main Dart file. And we are handling already quite a lot of states. And right after here, login view, excuse me, let's then say else if state is auth state forgot password, just like that. curly brackets. And in here, then we're going to say return const forgot password view. And this is going to be auto imported as well. Okay. So that's it. So that's that part, our forgot password. And what we also need to do is to make sure inside our login view. So let's go into our login view now. We need to have a little button in here that allows the user to go to the forgot password view. So we're going to add that in here. So I'm just going to create another text button. So copy the text button that you have at the bottom and paste it in between in here. Okay. And in this text right now, we're just going to say, I forgot my password, like this. And in here, let's just send AuthEventForgotPassword. Okay, so now if I press the Command S button to hot reload, you can see I forgot my password displayed here, and we press it. And at the moment, actually nothing is happening. It's probably because we changed our main Dart file and we haven't done hot reload. So sorry, hot restart. So I do a hot restart now, and I say I forgot my password, and you can see we end up in this screen that we just developed. And then you have the ability to send a reminder email. And if you say back to login page, then log out is sent and you end up in here. Okay, so that is working now. Now what we need to do also in a login view Dart in here. So let's go to login view Dart and have a look at how we're handling this user not found at the moment. And we have just user not found. But if you think about it, there is going to be people from both Apple and Google who will test your application when you send it to App Store and Google Play Store. So just saying user not found is a little bit, I don't want to say it's wrong, but it's just not fully encompassing what the problem could actually be. So saying user not found is like the bare minimum of what we could convey to our user. So let's just make that better by having a little bit better text in here. So I'm just going to write this text that I had from before. So it's better just to say cannot find a user with the entered credentials. Okay, just a little bit better message. As now that we've basically done the forgot password, we're going into the cleanup state. So we're adding some final UI touches to our application to make it look better. So as the caption indicates, let's go into login view and add a padding in here. You see, we just have a column and it kind of looks like edge to edge. It's not so professional. So let's just add a padding in here. I'm just going to say wrap with padding. And we're just going to say padding of 16 in here. Okay, so it looks a little bit nicer, in my opinion, at least looks cleaner. Okay, even if you're doing website development, your inherited, for instance, elements on the screen, they have like your user agent has some padding already or margins built into inherited widgets, inherited elements. So unless you go and change that in your CSS. So this is kind of us adding that padding in our elements in the Flutter application. So the next thing that we need to do in here, you can see in the login page at the moment, it's just on the top says log in and enter your email, blah, blah, but it doesn't actually give the user any instructions. You see here in the I forgot my password, we're giving the user some instructions on what he or she has to do, but in the login page, we're not. So let's go ahead and remedy that and just add a text on top of the screen. I'm going to paste that text from what I had before inside the children of this column. And we're just saying, please log into your account, blah, blah. And you'll see now that appear here. Just makes it look a little bit nicer, in my opinion. And we've already now fixed this, going from the login view to our forgot password. We've already added that in here, as you can see. So this element at the bottom of the screen, this caption is already addressed. We don't have to do anything special about that. Now let's go to register view. As you can see, have we broken the register view? Not registered yet. I can see that that button at the moment isn't working. So let's see what we've broken. Event should register. Okay. And inside our auth block, event should register. I can see we haven't even handled auth event should register. So that's, we need to definitely do that right now. So let's go to auth block and have a look at handling our, I'm going to remove this caption right now because that's not what we're working on right now. So let's go to our auth block. I'm going to maybe actually add that. So as a caption so that it is clear what we're working on right now. Okay, so let's go to our auth block and say on this event, and let's just say event and emit, just like that. And what we're doing in here is to say we're now emitting a constant auth state registering. Okay, and there is no exception and there is no loading, so false, just like that. Okay, and a comma here to get the formatting working. So now let's press hot restart, because remember, you're changing your auth block, which is being provided to your entire application in the main Dart file. So main Dart here. So you can see in here, it's the block provider that is basically creating the auth block. So if you change anything in your auth block, you may actually have to do a hot restart, okay, for those changes to take effect for your entire application. So not registered yet, pressing it goes to the register view, okay? So as the next point that we have to handle here is to add some padding to our register view. As you can see in here, our register view at the moment looks like this. We have the register button and already registered buttons right here, but we don't have any padding around our register view. So let's go ahead and take care of that. So I'm going to go to register view here, and let's go ahead then and wrap this column that is at the moment in here, and just say wrap it with padding. As the caption at the bottom of the screen says, we're going to add a padding of 16. So you can see now we have some padding in there. And soon, just like in the login view, we're going to add some text to the top of the register view. So what we need to do is just to ensure that the text inside this column is actually it's basically sticking to the left side of the column, because by default, all the components that you place inside your column are vertically aligned. No, sorry, they're horizontally aligned in the main axis of your column. So that's what I mean. Like if the column, what I mean is that the column is expanding to the entire space real estate, and then all the components that you're placing inside your column, they're horizontally aligned inside the column. So that's actually a better way of probably saying it. So what we need to do in here, let's just go in and say inside the column, as you can see in the caption at the bottom of the screen, we're going to say cross-axis alignment. We're going to say cross-axis alignment start. If I save this and go back to the register viewer, you're seeing this in here, basically like that. And what we're going to do then is to add a title to our column. So I've already added that before. So let me bring that up. So I'm going to add a little title to the first item inside the register view. So it looks like this. But we also, now that we've done that, I mean, we want our text field to be left aligned. That's why we added this cross-axis alignment. But we've kind of messed up the alignment of our buttons in here. So we need to kind of wrap them inside centers. So what we could do is to inside, you see we have two elements in here, but we don't want to wrap both of them in their own centers. So what we could do is just to say wrap this text button inside a column. Then we put the other text button also inside the column right here. And then we will wrap this column inside a center. So wrap this column then inside a center, just like that. So if you go back to our register view, now we have a nice little layout displayed there. So we've taken care of that. We've taken care of the title of our application. And what we also need to do is to make sure when we come to the register view that we are auto-focusing on our text field in here. So let's go inside the first text field, and right after autocorrect in here, we're going to say autofocus true. So when I press save in here and I go to the register screen, you can see that the keyboard pops up automatically, autofocusing on the first email field right there. Okay, now we also have a little problem in here, and that is that we haven't fixed our tests, as you can see in here. Implement send password reset in mock auth provider and throw. I can see there's a spelling error in the caption. I'm going to fix that right away. Like that. I apologize for that. And that is here. So let's go and fix our test. So I want you to please go to auth test in here, and you'll see that we have an error here telling us in mock auth provider saying that we haven't implemented the last function that we just added to our auth provider called send password reset. So let's go in here and just ask it to, ask it to create that missing override. And what we're going to do for this exercise at the moment is just we're going to leave this as it is on implemented error. And I actually encourage you to go and do an implementation for this send password reset. You may, for instance, do some mock and password reset, do some future delayed await on it, and change some states in your provider if you want to. You're more than welcome to do that. So you could just take this as an exercise. But we're just going to leave it like this for now. But I highly encourage you to actually write some tests for this as well. So we've now done quite a lot of work. We've done quite a lot of reshuffling things around. What we could do is just to have a look at the entire app and see how it kind of looks like. So I'm going to do a hot restart. And we end up in here. You can see our login screen works fine. And if we try to log in with a user that doesn't exist in the application anymore, so I could just type any password and say login, and we get our updated screen that says cannot find a user. Then I can actually go and register that user. The text field is autofocus that we fixed. So foobar Baz, register this user. And we can see that we get this verify email. We've sent you an email verification. And we also have to clean this view up soon, because I believe that this is not a part of this particular chapter at the moment that we clean this up, but we're gonna clean it up soon. So the verification email should have been sent now. So if I go to my mail application, I'll just see if I can somehow bring it up. So I can see that, have I received any email from Firebase? Yes, and that email is available here. I can bring it to the screen. As you can see, there is a link on it. So I'm gonna tap this link, and this will then verify my user. If we then go to our Firebase, so if I say console Firebase, if we go to the console of our application now, we should see that user generated here inside authentication. So that user is right here and is verified user. So we can just press the restart button and log in with that user. So if I say foobar Baz, log in, and we see our dialog and there are no notes. So I'm just going to create my first note in here. And it's sitting there thinking. And then I'm going to say hello world. All right, that's my first note. Going to go out. Let's go to the console again and to our application and have a look at our Firestore database and make sure that that note was actually created. And I can see that was actually created here, hello world, with that user ID, NVIC. If I go to authentication, I can see NVIC is actually, and indeed, that user. So it seems to be working. We have quite a bit of work still left. We have worked with the with some margins, we have worked with icons, app name, etc. before we can submit it. And these are things that we're going to take care of in the coming chapters. But we've come basically a good bit forward. So we're almost there, but not really there. So, but no worries, we're going to fix those soon. Let me do some screen reshuffling in here, and let's have a look at the committing of our work, which is something that we usually do at the end of every chapter. So I'm going to minimize strcpy, increase the size of Visual Studio Code so you see my screen better. Let's go in here to the terminal and have a look at this shell in here and say git status. And yes, we have a few files that are on track, which are new, which is our ForgotPassword View, which is new, and password reset email sent dialog, which is new, and quite a lot of files that have been updated in here. So let's just say git add all, and also git commit step 27. All right, git status, and we have to push our changes also. So after we've done that, let's also tag, as is tradition at the end of every chapter. We're going to tag this and push our tags. And after doing that, we can say git status. As you can see, there's nothing to commit in here and nothing to push. Again, as is tradition, at the end of every chapter, we talk about what we need to discuss in the coming chapter. So this is the exciting part. At the moment, we've been working a lot with the application code itself, but we haven't really done anything to make it ready really for release to the App Store and the Play Store, Google Play Store. And there are a lot of things that we have to do, such as screenshots we have to prepare for each respective store, and we also have to prepare the app icon, the app name, etc. So lots of work to do, and that's the kind of thing that we're going to take care of in the next chapter. So I'll see you there.